Good morning, everyone. And thank you for listening and watching. You're listening to the WCEG network. We are the worldwide community empowerment group where we speak life into the community. Log on to WCEGtalkradio.com. Watch us live on your smart TV, Roku channel, YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. I am your host, Attorney Melanie LaGrone, and I'm going to be the host of Beyond the Border this morning for about 30 minutes or so, where we speak all things about immigration. Subscribe free to our YouTube channel, WCEG Network. Like us on Facebook and Instagram. Connect with us on LinkedIn, TikTok, and Threads. Download our free WCEG mobile app. Alexa, play WCEG Talk Radio. Listen to WCEG on any of the 12 podcast distribution platforms. And last but not least, disclaimer. The topics and opinions are those of the show host and guests and not of WCEG Network. And thank you all for your continued support. Okay, so we're going to get into it. Today is the finale for the season. So what I thought I would do is I would do a brief recap of President Trump's 100 plus days in office as it pertains to immigration. And when I say brief, I have to say brief because obviously there is so much to get into and we don't even have time for all of that. But let's start with explaining what an executive order is, because obviously we know that he has signed multiple executive orders as it relates to a lot of different things in government, not just immigration. So first of all, an executive order is a written directive signed by the president that orders the government to take action. But executive orders cannot override federal laws and statutes. That is not what they are for. And immigration is bound by federal laws and statutes. Furthermore, the Constitution has checks and balances written into it so that one branch of government does not have more power than any other branch. And that is what Trump is attempting to override. Now, however, executive orders can be lawful and they still can be harmful. For instance, when we're talking about civil liberties and civil rights. So, all right, let's get into some of the things that he has currently put in place. So first and foremost, he has tasked the military with border security enforcement. By doing this, he has deployed over 10,000 military people, service members, which has probably equated to over like $300 million in military expenditures, which is huge, you guys. And basically what that is for them to come to the borders, right? And secure the borders and hang out in the borders and make sure that, you know, immigrants aren't crossing the borders illegally. He has a goal of deporting 1 million immigrants annually. He has expanded expedited removal nationwide. So these are the ways that he intends on doing this. He's expanded expedited removal nationwide. He has established arrest quotas. He has permitted immigration enforcement in previously secure places. So we're talking churches, schools, courts, places like that. He has expanded the 287G agreement. And what that is let's say, okay, so in a county here in Georgia, per se, when a client or when a criminal person or when a person has been charged with a criminal crime, all right, and they get arrested, they go to criminal jail, right? County jail, municipal jails, things like that. With the 287G agreement, this simply means that that particular county, if this person is undocumented or a green card holder, that county is tasked with letting ICE know. So picking up the phone and calling ICE and letting them know the name of the person that is in their jail currently, who is undocumented or who is a green card holder. And then at that point in time, ICE makes their decision on putting a hold on that person. So in other words, if the person gets a bond, okay, let's say in criminal court, they get a bond and they're able to bond out, if their family bonds them out, then ICE will come pick them up, because now the criminal courts have no more jurisdiction over that body, over that person. And now ICE will come and take them into detention. So that is the 287G agreements. Trump has threatened sanctuary jurisdictions. So in other words, those jurisdictions where they don't have a 287G agreement in place, so they refuse to sign this agreement, they will not enforce it. In other words, if they have undocumented immigrants in their jails, in their counties, stopped by the police, anything like that, that they are considered a sanctuary jurisdiction, and so they will not enforce this. But he has threatened these jurisdictions with civil and criminal penalties and fines, as well as funding. So threatened to take away funding if they do not enforce this agreement. He has dismantled discretionary pathways to green cards, okay, to lawful permanent residency. So things like, revoking parole for those entered under the CBP1 app. For those, he revoked the parole for Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, the parole program that was in place. He has revoked TPS, which is temporary protective status, for Venezuela, Haiti, Afghanistan, and Cameroon. So all of these immigrants who were here in the United States with some sort of temporary status, he has now revoked those programs, which means that no matter what is happening in their country right now, okay, because you can only get temporary status if there's something going on in your country to where, it is, either, there's war there, or there's, it could be natural disasters, things like that. So things that make it unsafe and unsecure for you to be there. He has revoked those programs, which means that if you were currently here in the United States and you're on one of those programs, you have to go back. But where are you going back to? Let's say if something is still going on in Haiti right now, okay, if the government is still in shambles, if there's still a lot of, distinction between the citizens and the police and the government and things like that, and you have to go back, what are you going back to? So those programs are now being revoked. He has also, suspended refugee admission. So for immigrants who are still out of the country, who are trying to come in because of a refugee type status, because of something that's going on in their country, he has suspended that. However, you guys, and it's funny because I just learned about this not too long ago. He brought over, I think it was like 40 something refugees from South Africa because they were allegedly being discriminated against. But these were white South Africans that he brought over on our planes to give them safe, sanctuary here in the U.S., to give them refugee status. However, though, he has suspended refugee admissions from other countries. Mind you, say Black countries. I mean, Haiti, places like that. Come on, you guys. He has, let's see, data sharing agreements between IRS and ICE. And let me tell you why I know that this has happened, because I had a family who had contacted my office and they wanted, to figure out some options on, their parents, okay, and how they could stay here. And the reason why they contacted the office was because they were scared. Now, their parents had been here like for 30 years, right? Not bothering anybody, okay? But they didn't have status. And the reason why they contacted the office at this point in time was because they were scared, because other family members of theirs were picked up by ICE, did not have a criminal history, nothing of that order, just, an older couple who had been in the United States for, 20, 30 years or something like that, just living their life, not bothering anybody. And ICE came to their house. And somehow, they opened up the door. ICE didn't have a warrant. They opened up the door, and the parents were taken out of the house. Um, and the only thing that they could think of, the reason why this happened or how they even knew that they were there, was because they recently had filed their taxes. And that makes a lot of sense, right? Because you have to put all your information on your taxes. And this right here shows that there's some sort of data sharing agreement between IRS and ICE because somebody contacted ICE. There's mandatory reporting, registration requirements now for undocumented immigrants. So you literally have to go online and you have to put in all of your personal information, your family members, all of that information. And basically you are registering to let them know that you are undocumented and that you're here in the United States. There's even been some instances where Social Security numbers for some individuals have been revoked. There is there's an assessment or like a daily fine for non-compliance with final orders of removal. So let's say you had a previous final order of removal and you did not comply. And if they pick you up again on that, that they could fine you for like daily. So per day of all the days that you stayed here while having that final order of removal. Immigration detention capacity has totally it's expanded. There's well over 50,000 detained immigrants right now. And there's plans to double that within the next coming year. There was an attempt to revoke over 1,500 student visas. Luckily, that was reversed by a lawsuit and it no longer stands. But what he was trying to do, what Trump was trying to do was actually, and he did it for some, but they did get their visas back. So if you are an immigrant from a different country, you're here in the United States on an F1 student visa, you are here legally, you are here with legal status temporarily while you attend school. This is a complete process that has been, vetted. You have to go through the school. You have to get, they call it a CVIS number. You have to apply all these things that you have to do in order to get into a school that takes non-US citizens through what's called an F1 visa. So he basically attempted to revoke these visas and send these students back to their home countries. He had invoked the 1798 Alien Enemies Act, and that was the act where, and it's crazy and it's stupid because this was meant for like war times. So in other words, in war times or times of invasion, it was in order to expeditedly deport, Venezuelan nationals, back to other countries, not even their home countries. But the Supreme Court intervened on this to stop that because basically what was happening is he's deporting people without due process and they were unable to contest their deportation. So there was no hearing or anything like that. So luckily the Supreme Court intervened in that and they stopped that. Let's see, what else do we have, you guys? We have the travel ban. So the new travel ban affects up to 43 countries. So in other words, if you are from that country, you are not going to be allowed into the United States. We had the effort to end birthright citizenship. Now, as you know, that was a huge one because what that means is that, and how this happened was, and I'm going to kind of go back. So this was like over like 120 something years ago where the Supreme Court ruled that and I believe it was a Chinese family, okay, a Chinese couple had a child in the United States, and that child was able to be a United States citizen because it was born in the US, even though both parents were not US citizens. So that's where that whole word birthright citizenship originally came from. So he is trying to now end that. And right now it is in the Supreme Court. They are listening to it. They are hearing it. My understanding is that there's kind of like a toss up, like you've got half and half who agree and don't agree with it. So it's going to be interesting to see how that ends up, because I'm thinking like even for like logistics purposes and stuff like that. So if a child is born here in the United States, obviously you're issued a birth certificate, all of your information is registered, with the court, the records department and things like that. And now if let's say they're saying that they come to the conclusion that if you are born of two non-US citizen couples, then and let's say what if the two citizens aren't even from the same country themselves? It's like, what goes on the birth certificate, and where does the birth certificate even go? And are we going to have like a list of just a whole bunch of birth certificates in like the records department with all these different countries of birth? And it's a little strange for me. I don't even see how logistically they could do that. But then again, too, it just doesn't make any sense. At the end of the day, if you're born on US soil, you are a US citizen, and that should be the end of it. But what he is saying is that so in other words, at least one of your parents must be a US citizen in order for you to be a US citizen if you're born here in the United States. So that's going to be interesting, and we'll see how that actually, pans out. He has declared English as the official language of the United States. I mean, come on. um, He's fired several immigration judges, several immigration staff members. He has reduced the Board of Immigration Appeals from 23 people to 15. Now, the Board of Immigration Appeals, they're tasked with appealing anything from the local immigration courts. So if, let's say, if there's an order of removal from an immigration judge, um, or, let's say maybe a motion to reopen a case has been denied, things like that. Or even let's say there was a whole hearing in immigration court for, let's say, an asylum case, and the judge denies, okay, issues an order, denies it, and maintains that there's an order of removal. As attorneys, we can file an appeal, and that appeal will then go up to the Board of Immigration Appeals, and they are the only group that hears these type of appeals. Well, he's cut that down from 23 people to 15 people. So, let's think about like the backlog that all of this is causing, the backlog that is causing an immigration court, with, getting rid of several immigration judges and staff members, things like that. So I'm not quite sure what, let's say, would be his game plan, because at the end of the day, if you allegedly want all these people, expeditedly removed, and you don't want, asylum cases, you just want those to be like dismissed without hearings, things like that. Like, who is going to do all of this work if you have gotten rid of so many staff members? Who's going to do all this work? So it's just going to cause a backlog in immigration court, and people are just going to be sitting in detention, waiting on their day in court, not knowing what's going on. Our motions and things like that are not going to be heard in a timely manner. We're not going to really get any sort of resolution on these, quote unquote, what did he say, million immigrants that he wants deported. Each year. So I'm not even quite sure how that's going to be managed. Um, and all of this has also, I mean, it's also causing, so not only is this causing the backlog, but like it's causing with all of this enforcement and these quotas and go out there and do this and do that and you know and local police are supposed to now have some sort of say, you know what I'm saying, in immigration and be able to detain you because of your immigration status and all of that. That is where now we are seeing bystanders, family members, even US citizens being caught up in detention because they were like in the presence of, let's say, targeted individuals, or they were at a house of a targeted individual or something like that. um and it's I think it's just ridiculous now because everything, people who should not be in the system are now being put in the system. um there was an incident where, I mean, things like this, where there was a young lady, she was a mom, once again, no criminal record, nothing like that. Like she wasn't a danger to society. She was here living her life with her US citizen children, and she was detained, taken into custody, and she was ultimately deported. Well, she was deported with her children, and one of her young children, like we're talking like underages, like under age 10, like we're talking probably even I think under age 5 or something like that, had cancer, or has cancer, still has cancer, and was being treated here in the US for cancer, and now has been deported with the mom back to a country that they don't even know anything about. They have no family there or anything like that. And with an illness, a deathly illness now, gone, done. I've heard of instances where there was a mother who was actually, she was deported, but she was deported without her children. And she was breastfeeding a young child at the time. So now her child is here without mom and breast milk, and mom is off in another country somewhere. Um, so it's just really getting ridiculous because these are not criminals. And his whole platform from the beginning was, we are going to, deport, the criminals and the people who are a danger to society, and things like that. And none of that is happening. I think it's even, I saw a statistic somewhere where it was roughly maybe even less than half, maybe even like less than a third of the people who are actually being deported have a criminal record. Um, One thing that I did want to touch on was, so he claims that, there's some things that he is doing that are pro-immigration, okay? So it's like, oh, I'm not that heartless. I'm not just, focusing on, anti-immigration things. I'm also, focusing on pro-immigration, like the gold card. And I get the biggest kick out of this because so the gold card, you guys, offers permanent residency, okay, to wealthy foreign investors. And these are people who want to pay $5 million plus to have legal status in the United States. So first and foremost, in my head, I'm like, who is a wealthy foreign person that really wants, to get legal residency in the United States and pay $5 million to do it? I mean, like, why? Who really wants to be here you know, that seriously? And then there's also too, and then here's the thing too, is don't forget, so immigration, like rules, like there are different types of visas and things like that, are governed by federal law. So Congress has to have a say in changing these certain type of visas. So what this would do is it equates to what we call the EB-5. So the EB-5 is an investor visa. And right now, I think it's anywhere from like 800,000 to $1 million or something like that. If you invest in the United States, then you can get permanent residency in the United States. But there is like requirements. So in other words, like it's a step by step, you have to invest. It has to stay here for so long. You have to create so many jobs. Like there's all these things that you have to do in order to get this green card. So he's essentially, attempting to kind of like rework the investor's visa, the EB-5, which in order to make those changes, you have to have input of Congress. And then two, it's like, oh, $5 million. So is it just if I give you $5 million? Once again, what are the requirements? Is the requirement just simply $5 million? Here's $5 million, now give me a green card. How is that even going to work? You still have to be vetted. You have to, there's an application process. There's, biometrics and fingerprinting and all that type of stuff that has to be done. So, but that is his pro-immigration efforts. Also, there claims to be an attempt for legal status for certain farm workers. In other words, like relaxing the rules for non-citizen farm workers, and supporting like H-2A visas, H-2A visa reform, things like that. But my understanding is that there really hasn't even been any sort of push, or like input to actually really get this off the ground. And then two, it's like, why are you doing this? Because our farm workers are, because the non-citizen farm workers are the hardworking people who are actually, doing things with the crops and agriculture, and all of that, and, really have some sort of, substantial, role here in the United States. Well, there's a whole bunch of other people that also too have substantial roles here in the United States. So why just do this with the farm workers? But those are the only two that I have seen and I have heard of, that are allegedly quote unquote pro-immigration. So I would love, we stream all over, we all, you can always go in and, do comments and things like that. But I would always be interested in hearing, what people's comments are and what they think and how they think all of this is going to pan out, because it has been a tough ride. It has definitely been, a very tough, 100 plus days of him being in office. But also too, there has been a lot of organizations, a lot of immigration organizations, AILA, civil liberties organizations like ACLU, all these different, even individual, people and immigrant statuses, things like that, who have filed lawsuits. And I think that right now is the best way to halt all of this, is just continue to have a voice, continue to stand up, continue to, write to your Congress, person, file lawsuits, do whatever you have to do, to make sure that things, get basically halted. Because at the end of the day, if he, if he continues to have, a fight, or he has to go against, the Supreme Court in order to get things done and stuff like that, maybe one day we'll be able to back him down. You know what I'm saying? If we just keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. But it's going to take a lot of pushing, a lot of fighting, and a lot of, motions and lawsuits, to do this. And maybe one day, hey, he'll just get tired, he's not a young chicken, that's for sure. So that is the immigration brief recap, of what has been happening, over these past months of, the new administration being in office. Once again, I do thank, WCEG network for this platform, to be able to come in and, of course, voice, my opinions and my guest opinions, and also to kind of bring knowledge and insight to the community regarding immigration and what is happening. So once again, I'm always going to leave everyone with, be prepared. Now is the time to, just start focusing on your options, what can be done, what you can do for your family, reaching out to an immigration attorney, a reputable, a very good immigration attorney to figure out what your options are, so that you can figure out, if you can stay in the United States with your family. So I am attorney Melanie LaGrone. Everyone calls me Attorney Mel. You can reach me on all social platforms at LaGrone Law. I'm on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and my office is in the downtown Lawrenceville area in Georgia. We also do have a satellite office in St. Thomas, the U.S. Virgin Islands. So if you'd like to reach me or you need to reach our office, feel free to call 678-250-5449. Again, that's 678-250-5449. If you're in the U.S. Virgin Islands, it's 340-626-0778. That's 340-626-0778. And you can find us at www.lagronelaw.com. And thank you all for listening, and I will see you next season.